Welcome to the Fractured Families Podcast. I'm Charity, your dedicated parental alienation coach, here to guide and support families as they navigate the challenges of high conflict divorces and custody battles. On this podcast, we'll share insights, practical strategies, and hope for those on the journey toward healing and justice. Whether you're personally experiencing these challenges or just want to learn more about the complexities of parental alienation and custody disputes, you're in the right place. You are not alone. This is the Fractured Families Podcast, where every voice matters and every story is heard. And if you find my conversation helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us reach more families who need it. Hey, thanks for joining the Fractured Families Podcast. I'm your host, Charity. Today I have with us Todd, who was an innocent father who was wrongfully convicted on false allegations of physical and sexual abuse against him during a high conflict divorce and custody modification. He filed for 8 weeks of the summer to be with his son shortly after allegations of abuse stemmed from his son through the coercion of his mother, Todd's ex-wife. And when that wasn't enough, alleged from the two stepsons during the marriage, who are now adults, fueled those allegations because there was no statute of limitations on sexual abuse. Todd is sitting in a prison with a 25-year sentence. And we welcome Todd to the show. I want to talk a little bit about your situations. Todd, thanks for joining the Fractured Families Podcast. Tell me a little bit about where you're at and why you're there.
In the Idaho State prison. Actually, it's a private prison in the state of Arizona. About a month ago, I celebrated 2 years in prison. I'm still kind of shocked by the whole thing. My nightmare started when I put in a modification to get my visa for 8 weeks. I tried for years to just get in for a couple of weeks instead of every other week, because flying from LA to Salt Lake, renting a car from Salt Lake, driving to Idaho, coming back, and then doing it all over again every week was just too much and too expensive. After years of trying and having failed attempts from an ex-wife who didn't budge and wouldn't budge, I had her served with a modification on April 13th, and that's where my nightmare began.
So prior to you filing for modification of custody, was there anything post-divorce or during divorce that made it difficult to spend time with your son, whether you were living in Idaho or once you relocated?
It was always a real pain to be in. She tried to make it as difficult as she possibly could. I have email, text messages. We had one particular time, I believe it was Christmas vacation of 2020, where we were flying in from California. We had rented a condo in Utah, which was about 2 hours south of her. She told us that she was going to bring him down because she had a family event in Springville, and that was on the way. Well, she changed her mind last minute, canceled us. She still went down to see her family, but she left our son at her sister's in Pocatello because she wanted me to have to drive all the way there to get him. So it was just a series of events like this, quite a bit. And then when I first divorced, I lived in Utah, which was a couple hours south of her. She would drive 30 minutes. I would drive an hour and 45 to get him. Once I moved to California, she stopped doing that. So she made me fly and then drive all the way to Pocatello to pick him up at her house.
So why did
Anything she could do to inconvenience me was what she did.
Why did you relocate from Utah to California?
Because I had two other children there, that one was finishing up middle school, the other was getting ready to start middle school, and I wanted to be closer to them. And I was able to transfer with the company I worked for. I did take a pay cut, but I thought it was more important to be around my other kid and see them through graduation, and then I'd probably end up moving further back up maybe to Utah to be around my youngest when he got a little older.
What was your relationship like with your youngest when you would spend time with him from traveling to California to Idaho to see him?
It was very good. There were times that he was a little awkward at the beginning when we first get him for the first hour or so. I think that was based on things that had been told about me and his other family. Stuff that would come out of his mouth, like we're not his real family. His real family in Idaho. His other brother and sister, he was told the same thing. They're not his real family. But every time we had it, he never wanted to leave. He loved it. He told us several times that he loved California more than I do. He left me a voicemail the last time I saw him. I kept that voicemail, thank God. I guess it didn't mean anything to the courts, but it should.
So you're sitting in a prison, Todd. Tell us how you think your lawyer represented you or didn't represent you. And at the end of the day, what were the charges that you were charged with, and how did all that start? You filed for modification, and then what happened?
So I had a very good friend put a timeline together for me. And in that timeline, it's pretty self-explanatory. I would think that anybody with common sense would be able to read through it. Something that I had against me is my ex-wife was an ex-sheriff for the sheriff's office who happened to be the ones to investigate this case. And the investigator, if that's what you want to call him, he knew my ex, worked with my ex. And as far as I'm concerned, and I think the normal public would assume the same, is why would anybody with a possible conflict of interest have anything to do with that case? But nonetheless, it was. So like I said, we had him spring break 2021. He had a great time. April 13th, once she was served with a modification, immediately, and as I went through the timeline again just today, I realized that I would call him, he would call back within a day or two every time until she got served on the 13th. Once she got served on the 13th of April, he called me back one time, and that was April 26th, after days of calls. That was the last time I talked to him. She denied my modification. She didn't try to negotiate. She immediately countersued, and then that's when allegations started of physical abuse. And that physical abuse was alleged to happen in California. It didn't go anywhere, and the fact that we had multiple videos, emails, eyewitnesses that proved that all to be false and false allegations. When her and her county sheriff friends realized nothing was going to happen in California, she quickly changed its allegations to Idaho. And in order to get out of Idaho, you had to go back 8 years.
So you were found guilty, Todd. Tell us about your sentencing.
So I have no criminal record. I have no criminal past. There is no evidence. It's a he said, she said case. I would think that a judge would take into consideration that it is a he said, she said in a custody divorce battle before any allegations came out. And the accusations changed multiple times through forensic interviews, through interviews with cops. I believe that they changed the approach. And so when I went in for sentencing, ruled that I was a horrible person and that I deserved 25 years to life. And when they found me guilty, I did make a comment as the jury stood up, and I said, "You just convicted an innocent man because he tried to get 8 more weeks with his child."
How has this conviction impacted your other 2 children, your older children that testified on your behalf about what a great father you were?
In utter shock. I have a nephew come in and visit me yesterday, and he was kind of going through some of the notes and old police reports, and one of the comments that was said, he's just like, how would anyone believe this? Can I share that comment?
Of course.
In the forensic interview, an adult claimed that 8 years prior that I would slither into his room in non-human form. That was just one of the many comments that I would think common sense would tell you is a joke. And comments like this that were ignored multiple times, stories changed to make sure they got the conviction they wanted.
So it's a very convoluted and complex process, and I would like to have continued opportunity to interview you. But for the sake of the time we have today, tell us about the role Child Protective Services played in the outcome of your conviction.
Health and welfare did a horrific job, to put it mildly. They made one phone call to me after the accusations were made. They had an ex-wife in California that told that particular person I was investigating that the only time she worried about her kids is when they were around my ex-wife. However, in the health and welfare report, she never entered that. She didn't think it was important. There was another comment made by my son that she admitted she didn't investigate to see if that comment was ever made to a school authority, And she admitted that she just took a 9-year-old's word at face value. But at the end of the day, with health and welfare, we fought that. And we appealed it. The same county, Bannock County, held it up. We took it to Boise, where they allowed us to bring our evidence in, which is videos, text messages, phone records, and people that were there, witnesses. And they overturned and made it so that it was not viable. But for some reason, the prosecutor ignored that and still took that to trial. And I will say that the allegations with my son, who this was over, that I did something to him when he was in a diaper.
So health and welfare eventually overturned the conviction of your offense in Idaho as a sex offender through Child Protective Services. Then it still proceeded to a criminal trial.
And they took California and Idaho and said they were unsubstantiated. In fact, he claimed that the ex-wife, who made multiple videos with all of her kids to make sure they got their story straight, was something he had never seen before and was definitely something that was weird.
I think I read the report, and what it said was the mother's role in the investigation of Child Protective Services was so overbearing, it was coaching and was definitely impeding the Protective Services investigation as well as the criminal case.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So let's talk about her. Let's talk about what that relationship was like prior to the separation and the divorce.
She's a very unstable person. She has a family history of mental illness. She had an aunt that was in a mental hospital her whole life. I remember her making a comment to me that she wanted me to go in to be diagnosed with either bipolar or personality disorder. And I said, yeah, great, let's go in. And she said, she goes, this is all about you. And I said, look, I'm willing to do it. I think you should too. I took that as my opportunity to at least get her in there to get her diagnosed. She refused. She got pissed off. Everything was me. And 8 months into that marriage, she lost a daughter, 6 years old. It's a tragic accident. My daughter, who had just turned 4 the week before, just happened to be in the room when it happened. And it was devastating. It was a devastating blow to the marriage, to everything. And because of that, I probably stayed a lot longer into that marriage than I should have. I will say this. She had a husband that passed away. She had 3 kids with him. She continued to tell me, since we got married, that family was horrific, horrible people. She felt like they had possibly molested her kids, that the ex-father-in-law had sexually assaulted her. I heard about all these people that assaulted her, sexually came on to her non-stop. She had us hide in the basement several times because she said they were in the area. They weren't from that state. And she told her kids they were going to kidnap them and take them to Mexico because the grandfather was from Juarez, Mexico, and was an ex-gang member. I believed it. I believe they were horrible people. 2013, she filed for divorce and kicked me out of the house. I made a phone call to her late husband's brother. And what a wake-up call that was. And that's when I realized she's doing the same thing to me that she did to them. She cut that entire family off from her kids. I have multiple emails, text messages through the years where I said, we will not be the Ortizes. And what I meant by that is we will not be cut out of my son's life. You can feel it coming. She knows how to play the game and play the people. That's why I'm here as an innocent man, father.
So she took your comments as a threat and said, I'll show you otherwise. As you were going through the separation and divorce, she offered for you to leave your son's life. Tell us about that.
She made me an offer that if I would sign off on him, she'd still give me visitation and she'd give me $10,000. I refused. Even though at the time I was devastated financially. I didn't want to allow my son to be with only her because I felt that he needed an outlet, because she's very wound up, very tight.
What was her relationship like with your 2 children when you were married and her 2 boys after her daughter passed?
Not good. It was worse than what I even imagined. And as I've grown closer to my kids, they were telling me that my daughter was telling me that she was telling her that I'm a horrible person when I wasn't around. Your dad's a horrible person. She would tell me that Mom lied, and it was actually her the one who was lying. But also something that's important to know, if we go back to when my son was born, she had some OCD properties. She would not allow our son to have formula or milk. She would only make him veggie drinks. In October of 2012, I got a phone call from his doctor that he wanted to meet me personally. And when he called me in, he said, "We have a serious problem. Your son is 5 months old and weighs 8 pounds. And I said, "Well, she doesn't believe in formula and she won't give him milk." He wanted to turn her into health and welfare. I said, "Let's not go that far. Let me see what I can do." But she blamed me and thought I was trying to team up with a doctor to turn her in. And this is the kind of abuse that the state of Idaho has turned him over to.
So we have 3 minutes left. Talk to me about where you're at today with your wrongful conviction.
So we have appealed. The Supreme Court accepted my appeal. That's a good sign. We have a date coming up in June. Hopefully the Supreme Court sees through the issue. My hope is that the average person out there that has no idea how the courts work, how the judicial system works, if you're innocent and you come in and you have no criminal record and you don't know how the game works, and you go in blind like I did, thinking the justice system and the truth will come out and that's the end of it. That's not how it works. Go look at previous cases. Truth doesn't matter to them, a lot of them. They're all about convictions, like the one that I had. That's why 3 months after my conviction, she tried to become a judge. The more convictions you have, the better chance you have of becoming a judge.
So you would say the systemic corruption in the county where you were convicted is pretty deep, runs pretty deep.
Absolutely. Look, in my case, every fact that went against their theory, they ignored or didn't put in a police report. They ignored my kids. They ignored my ex-wife in Riverside. They lied about it. We actually have concrete audio evidence that the investigator lied several times and committed perjury several times in pre-trial and at trial. And the prosecutor knew about it because we sent it to him. And she just ignored it, kept forward. But thank God she got kicked out. She's no longer a prosecutor. But my goal is to make sure she loses her license.
So one last question is, your kids, your 2 older kids, they support you 100%. This has impacted your life in ways that are unexplainable. How are you holding up?
I'm holding up. Build relationships in here. I try to help others in here. And I communicate with people on the outside, including my kids. I talk to them at least once or twice a week. My son is in the military, doing well. My daughter graduated, and she works at a preschool with kids because she got her younger brother taken away from her.
Thank you. Todd, we're out of time. Thank you. We would like to have you back, and we know there's much more to this story. So thank you for sharing. Stay strong. We know your Supreme Court hearing is coming up, and we look forward to hearing that, but we'll definitely get you another opportunity to be on the Fractured Families podcast. Thank you, Todd. Thank you for joining the Fractured Families podcast. That was Todd. He's an innocent father convicted on false allegations of sexual abuse. I look forward to hearing more from his story. This is going to be a series, and we look forward to you joining me on the Fractured Families podcast. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Fractured Families podcast. I hope our conversation has provided you with support, understanding, and actionable insights to help you navigate your own family challenges. Remember, healing is a journey, and reaching out for help is a sign of strength. You're not alone. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more families in need. You can contact me on social media at Parental Alienation is Real and visit our website for additional resources and ways to get involved. Stay strong, stay connected, and keep fighting for the family bonds that matter most. Until next time, take care and stay resilient.